actually speak over the video that had some nice music when we put it together. But now we'll just talk about, as Jeff mentioned in the outset, and it's appropriate that we're actually flying over the ethanol plant because this ethanol plant in Stockton, California, and the industry is doing the single most effective thing to reduce CO2 emissions in the atmosphere from transportation sources. On average, 40% reductions, and we can do a lot more. That's what we've been doing in our company. That's what other companies in the industry are doing to further reduce the carbon intensity. In our particular case, we started with a model where we put these ethanol plants right in the destination markets for both the fuel. You can see the fuel terminal across the road from our ethanol plant, a large distribution point. Another little known fact to many is that California is home in the Central Valley where our ethanol plants are located, the largest concentration of dairy cows in the world. So all of our products are produced and distributed locally. And what that allows on the feed end, this very high value protein co-product, distillers grains, is that we don't need to dry it. In the Midwest, it typically has to be dried to ship to these large markets out west and overseas. And since all of our products are sold within a 50-mile radius of the plant, we don't need to dry it. That actually reduces our process energy by 25%. So the key to lowering the carbon emissions from the ethanol plants is to reduce any of that still fossil energy you're using in the process. In our case, natural gas to produce steam. So we start off with 25% less by having the wet distillers grains. Just generally, our facilities in the industry, you heard about on the plant tour, how the efficiencies have gotten so much better. The yield, that's going to lower your carbon intensity per gallon when that yield goes up. We've put in variable speed engines, which reduces the amount of electricity, additional heat exchange, corn oil, which adds to the co-product credit. There's lots of things that we have done as a company, as an industry, that have just incrementally lowered that carbon to where in California's program, we're 30% better as an industry from the beginning of the program in carbon intensity and going a lot further. And it's pretty remarkable that at the 40% reductions that we're providing, and we're doing it at a 10% blends, 22 million metric tons reduced in the state of California since the beginning of the program. And what we can do if we can get to those higher blends and continue to work on more transformational technologies, which we can discuss now with these slides. So what you see here is a pipe that is bringing biogas from 12 dairies. This is to a facility. There's 4 ethanol plants in California. We own 2 of them, and the other 2 we market product for, and we all work together. This is Renewable Fuels, who is connected by pipe to 12 dairies who have a methane emissions problem, methane being a very potent global warming gas. They put in anaerobic digesters, captured that biogas, piped it to the ethanol plant, and it's just a wonderful symbiotic relationship. They're using that biogas to displace natural gas in their production of ethanol, producing the renewable fuel, producing that high protein product, which is then going back to these same dairies who are producing a high quality California milk product, and as a byproduct, methane, which then comes back again to the ethanol plant, reduces their emissions, and recycles back into the ethanol facility. So really remarkable relationship that we have developed with the dairy industry to support them, not only in providing them the largest source of protein feed in the state of California, but to reduce their methane emissions and help the ethanol facilities reduce their carbon intensities. So on the next slide, this is our plant in Madera, California, and in the foreground where it says White Fox, worked with them to put in a membrane technology, which is used in the dehydration process, producing that 200 proof product that we learned about in the plant tour, and using membranes rather than molecular sieves in part to reduce the energy. So this reduced our carbon intensity by a couple of points, about a 10% reduction in the overall process energy. So an example of one of the new technologies, this technology is being applied in other facilities. We were the world's first in a fuel ethanol plant, and we're happy to be a pioneer in that regard. On the next slide, really the next 3 slides, this is a very exciting project. We also were the first company, and this is our Madera facility, to install a large-scale solar. So outside of the natural gas, the second largest input of process energy is electricity. While the grid in California is clean, there's still a fair amount of natural gas and even some coal that's in the mix. So anything we can do to produce our own energy as 100% renewable is going to not only lower our carbon emissions, but in California, given the very expensive nature of electricity, lower our costs. But so we were the first commercial scale, it's a 5 megawatt solar system. You can see the field. If we could move to the next slide. I can't control the next slide, but hopefully it'll come up soon. There's 2 more, prettier shot with the, and then the last slide, 5 megawatts of solar power, which provides, you can see it in the context of the ethanol plant there in the background, provides all of the electricity needed for the ethanol plant and more when the sun is shining, and then we wheel it off the grid and bring some back at night. But it's meeting about 60 to 65% of our electrical needs. And as you can see, there's room to add additional panels. So a great opportunity for us. It also lowered our CI by 1 or 2 points. To put that in context, and this gets to the incentives that carbon policies bring into the mix. Every point, right now, the value of carbon has moved to a level that every carbon point, CI point, which stands for carbon intensity, that we can reduce our fuel by is equivalent to about 2 cents per gallon. And in a commodity business, every half a penny matters. So if we can do more transformative technologies to even get that 1 or 2 points is 2 to 4 cents a gallon. So very significant on a 60, 100 million gallon plant, whatever the size of your facility might be. And if we can drive it down to 5 or 10 points, not only can we get our carbon intensity something that's closer to 0, we also can have a real incentive to make these investments. And what would that be? The next slide is an example of cogeneration system that we're putting in at our Stockton facility, and it produces electricity more efficiently than pulling it off the grid, lowers the cost, lowers the CI by a number of points, and also allows us to use the waste gases that are produced in the fermentation process. You also saw the thermal oxidizer that was installed in ethanol plants. This replaces the thermal oxidizer. We actually use those gases in this system to be able to use it as energy as opposed to just disintegrating those materials. This system also can use biogas from nearby dairies and drive it down further. A more transformative technology would be something known as mechanical vapor recompression. We just got a grant from the California Energy Commission to install that uses compresses the gases and the vapors that are used, that are produced in the ethanol process, and makes for a much more efficient conversion into ethanol. Very expensive, but so a $25 million project, but it reduces the carbon intensity by close to 10 points. So again, that would be 20 cents a gallon. That's $12 million a year. So you can see that the payback would be less than 2 years for the system. These projects wouldn't be possible without these carbon policies. Natural gas is relatively inexpensive. There's no incentive for us to spend $20 million to reduce our natural gas usage by 50, 60%. But with carbon policies that price that carbon and give a strong incentive for us to monetize that value and make these investments, that's why we're considering it. We're not considering it because of the underlying value of ethanol. We're doing it because that the value of carbon is now, we're able to monetize that through California's carbon policies when we sell that product to our customers. On the final slide, Jeff had mentioned the corn fiber And this is, while a small volume, a tremendous opportunity to achieve a much lower carbon intensity. This technology here is separating the corn fiber from the starch in the corn kernel and allowing us to convert that really in the same process, but because we've separated it, we're able to then convert it into ethanol. And through California and frankly the EPA, we've been able to establish a pathway for this corn fiber where 2% of our total production is now cellulose ethanol from corn fiber, and our carbon intensity of this product is 70% lower than gasoline, running around 30 points. So if you think about the whole industry, this is a technology that could be applied across the industry, and it would be hundreds of millions of gallons, if not a billion gallons, of corn fiber ethanol that we could bring to market at an ultra low carbon intensity. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jessica.
Sure, thanks, Neil. You guys are doing a lot of exciting things out there in California. So I just, low carbon fuel standards are a hot topic right now, of course, in the policy world. I'd just like for you to discuss maybe how the California and Oregon clean fuels policy provided incentives for your facilities to reduce the carbon intensity of ethanol. I know you touched on it a little bit, but if you could maybe elaborate on that for the people on the phone and how maybe we could emulate that at a national scale.
Sure, happy to elaborate on that. It's what we have in California and Oregon is a very clearly defined, longer term in scope performance standard that basically says to the obligated parties, in this case the refiners and marketers, you have to reduce your carbon intensity by X over a period of years with a curve. And it is because it's performance based and because it has withstood legal, regulatory, political challenges, it has actually provided a long-term market signal to companies like us that we can make substantial investments that in some cases might be 2, 3, 4-year payback periods, because in California and Oregon, we know that there's a policy in place that the government is committed to, which both producers and marketers have bought into, which is fully supported by the environmental community and other stakeholders, that by 2030, so a very long time horizon, the carbon intensity of the fuel sold in Oregon and California needs to be reduced by 20%. Today, we're at 7.5% on that trajectory. So, a 20% reduction is quite aspirational. We're going to need new technologies. We're going to need some electrification, but what we're going to need in the case of liquid fuels, which are going to be with us for decades, is a quick decarbonization. And ethanol is a prime opportunity, in fact, the best opportunity today to get those reductions through higher blends, through new technologies that continues to drive our carbon intensities down. And I'd like to add that being in California and having experienced these wildfires of the last several weeks, if not now going into months, and the terrible destruction, and how climate change is absolutely a reason that we're seeing this rash of wildfires. We have to do everything possible in the here and now, and that where ethanol has such a great contribution to make. We can get further carbon reductions from ethanol today. We don't need to wait around for new technologies and new processes. We've got it.
Absolutely. So we're running up on the end of the hour here, but I do want to ask you one more question. Some people say that low carbon fuel standards are just an EV mandate. And I know you've lived this real world for several years in California and Oregon, like I just said. So how would you respond to someone who said that a low carbon fuel standard is just an EV mandate?
To decarbonize the way we need to, and which means reducing, if not eliminating, petroleum use, we need all technologies. Electrification is part of it. Renewable natural gas is part of it. Renewable diesel is part of it, and ethanol is a big part of it. If you look at California and their very aspirational goals of 5 million electric vehicles by the year 2030, at that same time, there will still be 30 to 40 million combustion engines on the road. And even many of those 5 million electric vehicles are going to be plug-in hybrids that need to run on a liquid fuel. So where we need to work very closely and in alliance with the electric folks, with the environmental folks, is to say we need all of these solutions bringing to bear to achieve the climate goals that we have. And in the case of ethanol, that means higher blends. So if you, again, look at California as an example and apply this to the nation, we've seen how well E15 can do when consumers are given the choice. If we actually reduced the consumption of gasoline in California by 25% by 2030, which would be more than the 5 million electric vehicles and efficiencies, and we combine that with E15, we would have hundreds of millions of more demand for our product in California than we do today. So it's really, we need to work together, and by achieving our objectives through some very ambitious carbon goals and adding a low carbon component to the renewable fuel standard, I think makes sense. We can see not only the growth of electrification, but a significant growth in biofuels as we decarbonize our transportation sector.
Well, thank you so much, Neil, for that. That's a great way to end our virtual tour of the Heartland. Although you're a little further west than the Heartland, you do have some facilities in the Heartland. So with that, we're going to close out the tour, and I'd just like to thank all of our panelists today for making it such a success. Uptown Farms, Mid-Missouri Energy, Western New York Energy, Trenton Agri Products, Casey's General Stores, and of course Neil with Pacific Ethanol for joining us today and giving us a tour of their facilities and talking a little bit about what they do on a daily basis. So with that, that is the end of our tour. I'd also like to thank all of the staff who tuned in today and stayed with us for the last 2 hours. Please feel free to reach out to myself or Connor Hamburg in our DC office if you have any questions related to the ethanol industry. We greatly appreciate your time today, and have a great weekend.